He yells out, "You don't belong in prison. You belong in a fucking insane asylum." And so all of a sudden, my nickname is now Running Man. Who I was going to be in this place was going to be up to me. I started running every single day, started doing yoga by myself, and people started coming up to me because they wanted what I had. 7 days a week, I had 50 guys running with me, 25 doing yoga with me. Comfort plays a weird role in all of our lives. It's not about minimalism, it's about simplicity. I had the idea in prison. I was pretty low at that point. I had also been at very high points, and I wanted to put a literal spin on it.
You were on the top of the world, now federal prison. How do you wrap your mind around that to survive what ended up becoming, I guess, 16 months for good behavior?
Yeah, well, they dropped me off at the front gate of federal prison. I'm literally like taking my wallet out of my pocket. I'm taking off any jewelry that I'm giving them everything, and
Right.
we're hugging, and there's a lot of tears, and it's very sad. I'll tell you the overarching emotion though, Charlie, was anger. I'm entering the gates of this prison and I am pissed off about what's been done to me. I'm way sad, but the anger is like just pushing everything else out. And I'm a little scared, but look, man, I did 10 years. First of all, this is a minimum security prison. Like, there's no rule book for this, but I knew that I wasn't going to be in there with, murderers per se and whatever. And there was going to be, out of 500 inmates, I knew in advance that there were probably 25 or so like white collar, criminals in there. And so that was my posse. But I'm in there and there's a guy, short little African American guy named Pick and Roll. I'll never forget him. Still have no idea what his real name is, but Pick and Roll is showing me around prison. It's like the worst summer camp ever.
He's like the mayor.
Right, exactly. And he's asking me questions. He's like, "So Engel, what's your bid?" And I don't know any of the language. I don't know anything. I'm like, I don't know what you mean. He's like, "How long will you be here?" And I said, 21 months. And he looks at me, he's like, "Shit, that's not long enough to unpack your bags." And and what I understood though in that moment, or
Right.
began the education of myself in the inequities in prison and the reality that I'm talking to a guy who got a 20-year sentence for a small amount of, crack cocaine that I probably had in my pocket, 100 times in my life. But there's a lot of reasons I never got stopped. We can, suss out exactly what those are. But I recognized real early that this was a chance for me. Anger wasn't going to get me anywhere. And my happiness, it slapped me in the face like a glove. My happiness was still entirely up to me. And who I was going to be in this place was going to be up to me. So a few days into it, I started running around the little, I called it a goat path out around the rec yard every single day. And that became my thing. And there weren't other runners in that prison. And it's where I got my nickname. There was a guy, after about 2 months of running at 5 o'clock in the morning, every single morning, there's a big line for breakfast. And this guy, he yells out, "Hey, Engel, you don't belong in prison. You belong in a fucking insane asylum." And he yells out Running Man. And so all of a sudden, everybody becomes aware that, my nickname is now Running Man. And that became the title of my book. And
Wow. What was the effect that you had on others in the prison?
yeah, people made fun of me. It sounds strange, but there's a lot of weird cliques in prison. We all see that. A lot of what we see on TV is accurate. And I minded my own business. I learned all the lessons early. You're walking, keep your eyes straight ahead. You don't ever there's a lot of things you just never do in prison. And I learned all those lessons, and I minded my own business, and I'm out there running. And a couple of months into me being there and doing this running every single day, a guy comes up to me, African American, and he's like 150 pounds overweight. And he comes up in the lunch line and he's like, "Hey, I used to play some basketball in high school." He said, "I gained all this weight. You think you can help me lose some weight with running?" I'm like, "Yeah, come on out tomorrow." And slowly but surely, this idea that you and I have discussed before, it's attraction over promotion. It's a bad idea, in case anybody listening decides to go to prison. It's a bad idea to go up to the guy and say, "Hey, dude, you're really fat. Seems like you should lose some weight. Why don't you come run with me?" And so I just went about living my life the best that I could in there. I read books every day. I wrote in my journal. I ran. I minded my own business. And people started coming up to me because they wanted what I had. I was at peace, man. When I accepted the fact that this was going to be the next year and a half of my life, I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but I just took it as not a vacation, but I just said, okay, for the next year and a half, I'm going to read over 100 books. I'm going to write in my journal every day. I'm going to work on my own book. I'm going to go to the library and educate myself. There's a lot of great guys in there. It won't
Yeah.
surprise anybody that life circumstances, lead people into making big mistakes. And, you know,
And
I
how
will
many
even say,
people did you end up helping?
oh my gosh. I had a running group that was over 50 guys. And
Wow.
so every single day, 7 days a week, I had 50 guys running with me at some point throughout the day. Another terrible idea is I started doing yoga by myself on the softball field a couple days a week, and people really made fun of that. By the time I left there were 25 guys 3 days a week doing yoga with me on the softball field. When I left that place, Charlie, people came, and there's not a lot of crying in prison, not good crying, and there were happy people coming to say goodbye to me the day that I took off, and even guards thanking me for what I did for them.
How much
And
weight did that guy lose?
I had one guy lose 200 pounds. That guy lost about 100. So, and
Jeez.
I actually still, I'm not going to get into
Right.
details, but at my local gym here in Durham, North Carolina, this was a West Virginia prison, but
Right.
most people were from Virginia, West Virginia, and North Carolina. I actually run into people that I was in
Wow.
prison with at my local gym from time to time.
Wow. And what's you hear in some of these prisons they only have like 10 minutes a day to exercise but in this prison, how, how
Yeah.
long could you be out there running?
When you're in low security, there are 5 count times every day, and I mean, I still know my prison number. It's seared into my head like my first phone number. 5 times a day. I had a job too, so I actually earned some money taking care of the rec room. So I probably made 16 cents an hour, let that
Uh,
sink in, for, whatever. I was lucky. I had money on the outside,
right.
so people could send money in to me, but doesn't matter who you are in the federal system. The most you can get any month is $300. So I don't care if you're a billionaire, nobody's sending in more than $300 a month so you can buy peanut butter and Pop Tarts at the commissary. Last count time was at 10 o'clock. And so you had to be in your room, in your cell, not your room. But by
Right.
then, 5 o'clock in the morning, I could be back out there. In my book, you know the story a little bit, but Badwater, the race that is in Death Valley every year, I actually ran Badwater while I was in prison one time, and it took place over the course of 2 days. And it was technically against the regulations to run more than 3 miles at any given time. So, but I ran 135 miles in those 2 days, and
Some of
so
it was
not
running in place, right?
well. And sometimes when we were in lockdown, during all my time there, I would run in place in my cell for 5 hours sometimes, and just big old pool of sweat all around me and on the ground. And people just thought it's not a bad strategy for a middle-aged white guy to be seen as a little crazy. It wasn't really my goal, but it served me well. Most people left me alone. 60 Minutes and like all these TV shows wanted to come in and talk to me. The prison would use safety and security as an excuse not to allow interviews.
Right. And what was the effect of a very well-known New York Times writer writing a few articles about how like unjust this was?
Well, and that happened because of my dad. I'm in there, and this is at the time when, Joe Nocera is writing about the after effects of this
Right.
insane, mortgage meltdown that the entire world experienced, mostly thanks to America. And he said, why isn't anybody in prison? And my dad wrote to him actually and said, I beg to differ. My son's in prison. for this, which is just incredible. And once Nocera started looking into it, it was weirdly, gratifying to have someone of his stature and understanding be able to just say in very clear terms, number one, with all the shenanigans going on, there wasn't actually even a crime committed. The crimes were way up here. The crimes were
Right.
a whole different thing. And this was nothing more than an excuse. And look, I don't want to talk politics, but like I voted for Obama back then, and it was his attorney general, Eric Holder, who was the one coming after me, like literally coming after me. I'm like, how is this possible?
I've worked for Obama, but it's a whole different, it's government. And
Well, everybody needs somebody to blame, and government more than anything, and I don't care which administration is in power, blame is going to land somewhere else, and it's going to land on people.
yeah, no, you have several million government employees. They're there for a whole career.
Yeah,
Republicans, Democrats come
yeah.
in, but they have their job secured and they know how to use the system. So you survived. You basically wrote your book there and you get out. What happens next?
I've got no money. I got no money. I don't have a place to live. So my friend lets me move back in with him. By the way, the final insult to injury here is I am ordered to pay Bank of America $262,000 because at the judgment, this is just, it's so heinous that it just is laughable. There was a point at which Bank of America supposedly was going to assume the debt of Countrywide way back when. That never happened. And so that deal never, yet I was saddled with $262,000 to have to pay back to Bank of America. I'd never even had a loan with Bank of America ever. It's so insane. Like you can't make this stuff up. Anyway, so I now have to get on with my life by going out there into the world. And I've got, by the way, 5 years of what they call supervised release, meaning I have to check in, I have to do urine tests, all the things, like whatever. I've got to do all this stuff. And what I learned, and I think this is maybe in a sense, the greatest lesson ever for me, Charlie, is that as human beings, we think the rest of the world is thinking about us a lot more than they actually are. Like, people didn't really I just went out and started living my life again. I started running races, and a few people would ask me questions or whatever. Most people said, welcome back, because they generally, people in my life and not even not in my life, knew that it was unfair, and I could spend or waste my time talking about how unfair life had treated me, or I could just own my own narrative. If you don't own your narrative, somebody else will. So I started speaking on stages all over the country. People wanted to hear what I had to say, and I took the message, I hope, of resilience and of of all the suffering in the world. And I like to make jokes, that. My
Mhm.
biggest joke that I would tell on stage for years was, my biggest problem was, what kind of tattoo do you get for like mortgage fraud? Like a fountain pen, or maybe a
Right.
postage stamp or something like that, like. And relatively speaking, what happened to me didn't even crack the surface of genuine unfairness in the world at any time. There's people suffering all over the place. And I came away from it with a greater respect and understanding of who is in prison, why they're there, all of those things. And I recognize that if I didn't have to be a goody two shoes or change my ways or whatever. I still got to speak my mind. Just like as a parent, if you keep showing up and you're consistent and people can count on you, all that stuff, you brought me into R360.
Yeah.
I mean, an amazing,
Yeah.
powerful,
I
incredible group of
yeah.
people. And
I
never
just
one time did you like
yeah.
consider not bringing me
No,
in.
I love your story, and we're backing you on this next crazy thing, which I hope you don't get killed by pirates in the Red Sea.
Me
But
too.
yeah, but the age of 64, why are you going to go from the lowest part of the earth to the highest, scaling a mountain, and then you're rowing a
Yeah.
1,000 miles in like pirate infested waters?
It's a terrible idea. Just trust me. That's the only
Yeah.
kind I ever have, just bad ideas. But no, look, The difference is this time for me with this kind of an expedition is I am much more in a frame of mind today of self-discovery, of cultural exploration. I like to say this is more like Anthony Bourdain does adventure travel. Like, I'm not trying to set records, or I don't want people to look at me and say, "Oh my god, you're running how far?" I want them to look at me and say, "I see you went through that village and you stopped and you worked with all these kids and you did this and that. Like, what's that about?"
Right.
And it's an opportunity for me to see parts of the world I haven't seen before. I'll cross the entire Arabian Desert, then the Indian Ocean, and then cross India and Nepal and go to the top of Everest. I had the idea in prison. And this is it's a super simple thing, but when I was in prison, I had a locker that was about this big, and everything that I owned in that prison had to fit inside that locker. And it reminded me of this idea of how comfort plays such a weird role in all of our lives. We think we need more than we need, and when all of it's taken away, weirdly, life gets a lot simpler. I'm not suggesting that we all dump all our stuff or whatever, all those. It's not about minimalism, it's about simplicity, and it's about not craving comfort. And so I had the idea, why not put a literal spin on, like, I was pretty low at that point, and I had also been very high points. And I wanted to put a literal spin on it and go from the lowest place. So I went into the library and I got an actual, like, almanac, and I started researching the route. I mean, this expedition goes back to
Wow.
2012. That's how long it's taken me to put this together.
Wow.
And, and I will do it human powered. It'll take about 4.5 months. It'll start January of 2027, and I'll do a free dive in the Dead Sea, and then I'll come back up, I hope. Otherwise, it's like the world's shortest expedition. And I'll come back up and I'll start my journey all the way to Mount Everest.